morning. It's April 15th here in Seoul, and I'm Peunji. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with an escalating crisis in the Middle East. Iran launched a massive aerial attack on Israel over the weekend, with the large majority of the drones and missiles intercepted. U.S. President Joe Biden says Washington will not participate in any counterstrike against Iran, while Israeli officials are reportedly discussing the scope and timing of a response. President Yoon is preparing to replace the country's new prime minister and the presidential chief of staff. This is taking longer than expected after the two senior aides decided to resign following the ruling party's defeat in the general election last week. Donald Trump is set for trial, making him the first former U.S. president ever to face criminal charges and the threat of imprisonment. The historic criminal trial, which will begin Monday in New York, comes amid a crucial period as he seeks re-election in November. Uncertainties grow in the Middle East region after Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles from its territory toward Israel over a 5-hour period. Though most of the strikes were prevented, Israel pledged retaliation. Iran warned of even stronger attacks if retaliatory measures from Israel or the U.S. follow. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
It was an unprecedented attack, marking the first ever direct overt attack launched at Israel from Iranian territory. Hundreds of drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles were launched at Israel by Iran on Saturday night, 12 days after an Israeli strike on the Iranian embassy complex in Syria. 99% of projectiles fired by Iran were reportedly intercepted by Israel and its partners, with U.S. President Joe Biden during a call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu describing the situation as a win, which demonstrated Israel's superior military capability. Biden also reportedly told his counterpart in Tel Aviv that the U.S. will not participate in any offensive action against Iran, though Washington's ironclad commitment to Israel's security against Iranian threats remains. With Washington seeking to contain the risk of a wider war in the Middle East region, a New York Times report said Biden had convinced Netanyahu not to greenlight an immediate retaliatory strike. However, Israeli Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz said Israel pledged to exact a price from Iran, although there is yet to be any indication given over the scope and timing of the response. According to the Israeli lawmaker, it is yet to be determined whether Israel will break all the dishes or do something more measured. And to such retaliatory discourse, the Iranian Armed Forces Chief of Staff warned that should Israeli attack, its response would be decisively stronger and more resolute, and any backing from Washington would result in U.S. bases being targeted as well. Meanwhile, after Iran's attack, G7 leaders convened and unanimously condemned Iran's attack and called for restraint from all sides to prevent a regional war. A UN emergency session was also held upon a request from Israel, where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for a de-escalation of violence and maximum restraint, while saying people in the region are confronting the danger of full-scale conflict. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In response to Iran's attack on Israel, South Korea strongly condemned the move, with President Yoon convening an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Seoul's foreign ministry released a statement on Sunday afternoon, strongly condemning the large-scale attack on Israel by Iran and calling on all parties to exercise restraint to prevent further escalation. This came after President Yoon called an emergency meeting of senior officials to discuss the potential security and economic impact across the world. He called on the government to thoroughly review risk factors and prepare measures for the safety of Korean citizens, businesses, and diplomatic missions located in Israel and the Middle East. Yoon also requested authorities to closely monitor and analyze global oil prices, the energy market, and supply chains. On the local front, President Yoon is preparing to replace his key aides and the Prime Minister after they resigned following the Liberal main opposition's landslide victory in the general election last week. The new appointments are taking longer than thought as they were expected to be announced over the weekend. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
President Yoon is taking longer than expected to name a new Chief of Staff and Prime Minister, as his administration cautiously mulls its next steps after the general election last week handed the opposition a majority in Parliament. Key officials, including the Chiefs of Staff, senior secretaries and the Prime Minister, offered to resign after that disastrous outcome for the ruling party.
Yoon's officials have hinted that even Monday could be too early to announce the new appointments, saying they need at least a minimum amount of time to screen the candidates. This is perhaps to avoid any potential backlash from the opposition or public criticism that could arise from rushing the process. Of course, there is no set deadline, but it's unlikely to take too long, as the Yoon administration has committed to self-reformation, with a major overhaul of senior figures likely to become the first step.
In contrast with Yoon's previous appointments, the incoming Chief of Staff is likely to be a political heavyweight who can skillfully work with an opposition-held parliament and make an astute response to major domestic issues and crises. The rumoured candidates are Transport Minister Won Il-yong, former opposition leader and National Unity Committee Chair Kim Han-gil, lawmaker Chang Jae-won and Interior Minister Lee Sang-min. More high-ranking staff, including senior secretaries for press, society and political affairs, are expected to be replaced. But the Chief of Staff for Policy and senior aides for Economy and Science may retain their positions for continuity. Appointing a new PM could take longer as it requires parliamentary approval. The likely candidates include Kim Han-gil once again, as well as former Unification Minister Kwon Yong-se and ruling party lawmaker Chu Ho-young, who were re-elected for their 5th and 6th terms respectively, to fully reform the management of state affairs, as the president pledged last week. His office is considering a major cabinet reshuffle and a restructuring of the presidential office to make it more receptive to public opinion. This could involve resurrecting the position of a senior secretary for civil affairs or creating a new division to facilitate better engagement with Parliament and the public. To set the tone for the administration's way forward over the next 3 years, Yoon is planning to convey his position on the general election sometime this week, possibly through a televised address to the nation, a cabinet meeting speech, or a press conference. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
China has sent its highest-level delegation to North Korea since the North opened its borders following the COVID-19 pandemic, further strengthening their bilateral ties. For more details, we're joined by Dr. Stephen Norper this morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. China's third highest-ranking official, Zhao Leji, met with Kim Jong-un over the weekend and said they'll boost cooperation. Is it likely that the leaders of North Korea and China will hold a summit soon?
That's a potential, and it's important that this meeting was the highest level representation from China to North Korea really since 2018. So it means that with the pandemic behind, that China and North Korea are recalibrating relations. Clearly, this comes on the heel of the United States meeting with Japan and the Philippines, and so it's signaling something of a counterweight development. And really importantly, China doesn't want to be left out relative to North Korea's improvements with Russia. And I think China has looked at those in a cautionary way, and hence they're interested in trying to get North Korea back on board and to signal a closer relationship between Beijing and Pyongyang.
Right, and how will stronger ties between North Korea and China affect the Korean Peninsula?
Well, they affect them very directly. Clearly, we're at a period where North Korean tests have been accelerated. There has been a high degree of rhetoric around the peninsula. And so tensions are very, very high. And moving to a de-escalatory tone is very important right now. We've seen how quickly things escalate. We've just seen that with Iran and Israel. And we know that this is a world replete with conflicts, to include Ukraine as well. And so trying to find ways to develop ties, and in this case, China sees North Korea as a way to check the United States and Japan and Korea, South Korea, in their enhanced relations, and that trilateral has grown strong. And again, they also see it as something of a complement, but perhaps in some ways a counterweight to Russia's improvement of relations with North Korea. So for China, they're concerned about a flashpoint on the Korean Peninsula, and they want stability. And this sort of meeting is what guarantees that, or at least moves it along for Beijing.
And North Korea is also reportedly working with Japan to hold a meeting between Japanese Prime Minister Kishida and Kim Jong-un. U.S. President Joe Biden also showed his support for the meeting last week. What's your take on this?
Well, the feeling is that any intermediary with North Korea would be helpful at this point, given the escalation of tensions around the Korean Peninsula. Kishida would very much like that, primarily for domestic reasons, as he faces an LDP vote in August. But Kim Jong-un knows that, and so Kim Yo-jong, his sister, signaled a heavy reluctance by Pyongyang and demanded a heavy price, which was not to discuss abductees nor nuclear issues. For Japan, that's a non-starter because both abductee issues, meaning Japanese abducted by North Korea in the 1970s, as well as nuclear issues, which are shared by concerns shared by Japan, the United States, South Korea, and the international community, would be on Japan's agenda. So we'll see where it goes, but it is largely at this point one where Kishida would like a meeting for domestic reasons. Biden, too, sees some benefits to having Japan, one of its strong allies, somewhere in the mix. And of course, Japan would be coordinating with South Korea, and that will take some work as well.
Absolutely. And today, April 15th, marks the birthday of North Korea's late founder, Kim Il-sung. And there's speculation that North Korea could launch its military spy satellite to mark this day. Will the North conduct a launch this month, possibly, maybe even today?
Well, there could be a launch, and we should expect that they will try to do that, especially on the heels of South Korea's successful improvements in terms of satellite launches. North Korea has tried. It failed in its initial attempts. It does have a record now of recent success. It will try to do more. The question is, does the rudimentary technology that North Korea has put up there really allow any enhanced capability? Or again, is it just a way that Kim Jong-un signals to his public that he's prepared and making adjustments for readiness? The feeling is that North Korea's capabilities are very limited. The question mark is whether Russian technology will be introduced in this complex. And if Russia was to assist North Korea in terms of advancements in satellite technology, that would really warrant the concern of South Korea, the United States, and Japan and their international partners, because it would alter, again, the ability and the capabilities, especially given the lethal enhancements that have been made in North Korea's missile technology.
And South Korea put its second reconnaissance satellite into orbit last week. You just talked about capabilities. What's your assessment of North Korea's satellite capabilities compared to the South?
Well, South Korea's are generations ahead and markedly better. And of course, the U.S. And South Korea share a common interest in this type of space technology, SpaceX being involved. But South Korea has really done a tremendous job in terms of developing latest state technologies. And I don't think we should overstate it or compare it to North Korea's because South Korea is just so much more technologically advanced. Of course, the concerns are with the ratcheting of tensions around the Korean Peninsula. South Korea wants maximum capabilities in terms of what it's reading. And the United States, Japan, and South Korea want to be cooperating and coordinating on real-time assessments of what is happening with North Korea's missile launches.
All right, I guess we'll just have to wait and see when the North will launch its satellite. Dr. Norper, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, a pleasure.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump will appear in court starting this week on charges related to allegations that he paid hush money to prevent a scandal ahead of the 2016 presidential election. This marks the first time in American history that a former president will stand before a jury in court as a criminal defendant, with the outcome of the trial expected to have a significant impact on the direction of the presidential election in November. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Donald Trump will become the first former U.S. president to ever stand before a criminal trial, with his lawyers, prosecutors, and Justice Juan Merchan set to pick jurors in a New York courtroom on Monday to hear evidence on charges related to allegations that he paid hush money to prevent a sex scandal ahead of the 2016 presidential election. Trump has been indicted on 34 felony counts for falsifying company records linked to money allegedly paid through his lawyer Michael Cohen to prevent the disclosure of his past sexual relationship with a former adult film star, Stormy Daniels, just before the 2016 presidential election. While Trump faces a total of 4 criminal trials, this is the only criminal case scheduled for trial before the November presidential election. Trump has strongly denied the allegations of manipulating his company's accounting figures and that he had a sexual relationship with Daniels. He has claimed that the allegations are politically motivated by the Democrats. As the defendant in the criminal case, Trump must appear in court throughout the trial scheduled 4 days a week, excluding Wednesdays for about 6 to 8 weeks. So much time spent in court could be a crucial setback for the former president at a time when he should be focusing on his election campaign. While Trump's team of lawyers have made an all-out effort to postpone the trial until after the presidential election, it was not accepted by the court. Each of his 34 indictments carries the possibility of a 4-year prison term, with Trump certain to appeal any guilty verdict and sentence. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The number of people who moved to the capital Seoul for education purposes, including for going to college or for a child's education, reached a record high in 2023. According to the Korean Statistical Information Service on Monday, more than 1.2 million people moved to Seoul last year, with 92,000 of them citing education as the reason. That's the highest since relevant statistics were first compiled in 2013, and an increase of 9,000 from the previous year. Data also shows that while the number of people leaving the capital for reasons such as high housing prices and population density is steadily increasing, education and employment still remain the top reasons people move to Seoul. Korean literature has been drawing attention on the global stage lately, with some even calling it the K-book phenomenon. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin looks into what sets Korean books apart.
2024 has so far been a great year for Korean books. Last month, Kim Hae-sun became the first Korean author to win the U.S. National Book Critics Circle Award. Lee Gumi achieved another first for Korea by being shortlisted for the prestigious Hans Christian Andersen Award, while 3 Korean picture books won trophies at the Bologna Ragazzi Award. Novelist Hwang Seok-young's Mater 210 has also been shortlisted for the 2024 International Booker Prize. This success stems from Korea's decades-long efforts to export its literary works.
Since the 2000s, we've seen a surge in Korean literature exports, especially after Arthur Hangang's 2016 Man Booker International Prize win. The evidence is domestic publishers establishing dedicated departments dealing with copyright and intellectual rights of Korean authors, an increase in contracts with major overseas publishers, and minimum guarantees for Korean authors soaring from 4 to 6 digits.
The numbers don't lie. Translation requests for Korean literature to the Literature Translation Institute of Korea jumped more than 20-fold in 2023 compared to 2014. What makes Korean literature appealing is the blend of distinctive, yet relatable themes.
Korean literature offers a unique perspective shaped by Korea's historical, political, and societal contexts, such as it being a divided country, which attracts international readers eager to explore something new.
Many readers often try out Korean literature through their love of Korean dramas and films. But what attracts them is how authors incorporate relatable themes like human rights, environmental issues, and challenges facing the younger generation into their unique storytelling.
But captivating themes aren't enough. Skillful translation is a must to captivate international readers.
A great translation preserves the emotional depth of the original by understanding both the author's narrative and the nuances of the target language and culture.
That's why the Literature Translation Institute of Korea has been running its Translation Academy since 2008. Notable graduates include Sora Kim Russell and Youngjae Josephine Pae, the translators of Mater 210, as well as Anton Hall, who translated Chung Bora's Booker Prize-nominated work, Cursed Bunny. Looking ahead, as the majority of translated Korean works are currently commercial fiction, introducing long-standing classics could ignite even more curiosity and interest in Korean literature. 송유진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in Australia, where 6 people were killed and at least 12 injured in a stabbing attack at a mall in Sydney on Saturday. The attacker was fatally shot by a police officer at the scene. At a press conference on Sunday, the New South Wales police announced that 40-year-old Joel Cauchi was responsible for the attack at a busy Sydney shopping centre not far from the world-famous Bondi Beach. 5 females and 1 male, all aged between 20 and 50, were killed in the attack at the Westfield shopping centre in Bondi Junction. 12 others are in hospital. New South Wales Police Commissioner Anthony Cook said that the attack was not terrorism-related, but rather related to the mental health of the individual involved. In Niger, hundreds took to the streets over the weekend to demand the departure of U.S. troops from the country. This followed a strategic shift by Niger's ruling junta, which ended its military accord with previous Western allies such as the US and France, and instead welcomed Russian military guidance. Demonstrators called for the departure of around 1,000 US military personnel from 2 bases in Niger. They held handwritten signs with messages such as "God Curse USA." Until Niger's coup d'etat in July last year, it was a key security partner for France and the US, but the new junta government has joined the likes of Mali and Burkina Faso to end military deals with Western allies, leave the economic community of West African states, and foster closer relations with Moscow. Russian military instructors and equipment were seen arriving in Niger on Wednesday, dictating the junta's openness for closer cooperation with Russia. Now to China, where 130 Chinese nationals suspected of crimes related to gambling and fraud were repatriated from Cambodia on Saturday to face trial. The arrival of the suspects in Wuhan follows enhanced cooperation between Cambodian and Chinese police to combat cross-border gambling and telecom scams. Over 100 Chinese suspects were captured in a recent operation, along with an inventory of digital equipment. Chinese police say another batch of suspects will be repatriated later on. Bayer Leverkusen have won their first ever Bundesliga title. Leverkusen were confirmed as champions of Germany's top football league, the Bundesliga, after a 5-0 win over Werder Bremen on Sunday. Striker Victor Boniface and midfielder Granit Xhaka each scored 1, while 20-year-old midfielder Florian Wirtz scored a hat-trick. Xabi Alonso's undefeated team have won the title with 5 games to spare, breaking an 11-year stranglehold on the league by Bayern Munich. Bayer Leverkusen have now gone 29 matches without defeat this season, setting a new league record.
Good morning. Only about a week ago, we had a peak cherry blossom season. Then it felt like we jumped right into the beach season yesterday with record-breaking April warmth in Seoul. But today's rain will put the brakes on abnormally warm afternoon temperatures, not going up much from today's morning temperatures. Right now, rain clouds are dropping showers in the western regions in Jeju, with a heavy rain advisory issued in parts of Jeju Island. The much-anticipated rain should gradually expand to the rest of the country to ease the dryness in the air today. The south coast and mountains regions in Jeju could see more than 80 millimeters of heavy showers, while other parts of the country will see 5 to 60 millimeters of rainfall. Daily highs will be 5 to 10 degrees lower this afternoon, topping out at 19 degrees here in the capital, 20 degrees Celsius for Daegu, Daejeon, Gwangju, Gyeongju, and Chuncheon this afternoon. After the rain subsides tomorrow morning, we'll have typical spring weather with a threat of yellow dust sweeping into the country. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Thank you for watching. We'll bring you more updates at the same time tomorrow.